You step off the cobblestones and into the thick, freezing mud of a London alleyway. The year is 1380, and the night air clings to your skin like a wet shroud. Above you, the overhanging timber frames of the houses block out the stars, leaving you in a tunnel of shadows and the stench of open sewers. You are heading toward the bankside, where the red lanterns flicker and the sound of coarse laughter spills from the stews. As you push open the heavy oak door, a wall of heat hits you. It is a suffocating mix of wood smoke, unwashed bodies, and the metallic tang of cheap ale. Your eyes sting, and your heart hammers against your ribs. The floor is slick with filth, and the faces in the candlelight are desperate. You are about to realize that this world has no mercy for you. To understand why you would not survive this night, you must first understand where you are standing. You have just stepped off the southern end of London Bridge, leaving the gates of the walled city behind you. Before you lies Bankside, a marshy stretch of land along the south bank of the River Thames. In the late 14th century, this is not merely a suburb. It is a legal void. You are standing in the liberty of the Clink, a manor owned and governed not by the King or the Mayor of London, but by the Bishop of Winchester. The air here hits you like a physical weight. It is thick with the briny, sulphurous stench of the Thames at low tide, mixed with the overwhelming odor of open sewers and the charcoal smoke from 1,000 hearths. Underneath your boots, the ground is a treacherous soup of gray mud and animal waste. There are no paved streets here. There are only narrow, winding tracks that disappear into the shadows between timber-framed buildings that lean over the path like hunched old men. You look back toward the city of London. It is a silhouette of spires and stone walls, locked tight for the night. Over there, the bells of St. Paul's Cathedral are tolling the curfew, and the heavy iron chains have been drawn across the streets to keep the peace. But here on the South Bank, the rules are different. The bishop has granted special licenses for certain houses to operate. These are the stews. You might think the word refers to a thick soup, and in a way you would be right. These buildings began as public bathhouses where people could soak in hot water. But over time, the steam and the heat became a front for something else entirely. As you walk deeper into the darkness of Bankside, you see them. Hanging from the upper stories of the jettied buildings are signs. They do not have names like modern shops. Instead, they display painted images. You see a boar's head, a castle, and a cardinal's hat. One house features a large, painted red rose. Beside the doors, flickering tallow candles are placed behind panes of translucent horn or red cloth, casting a sickly, bloody glow onto the muddy street. This is the red lamp of the medieval world, a beacon for the desperate, the lonely, and the dangerous. You feel a sense of unease. You are used to the bright, electric safety of the 21st century, where a police officer is a phone call away. Here, there is no such thing as a police force. There are only the beadles and the constables, men who are often in the pockets of the very people they are supposed to watch. If you are robbed in one of these alleys, or if a knife finds its way between your ribs, the City of London will not care. You are outside their jurisdiction. You are in the Bishop's Garden now. The women who work here are known mockingly as Winchester geese. It is a cruel irony. They are called geese because they are under the protection of the Bishop of Winchester, and because they often congregate near the water. As you pass a doorway, a woman leans out. She is wearing a hood of striped cloth. This is not a fashion choice. By law, the women of the stews are forbidden from wearing the fine furs or silk veils permitted to respectable wives. The striped hood is a badge of her trade, a way for the authorities to mark her as a public woman, ensuring she can never melt into a crowd of honest citizens. You try to keep your eyes down, but the noise makes it impossible. From inside the houses, you hear the muffled sound of lutes and pipes, the raucous laughter of drunken sailors, and the occasional crash of breaking pottery. This is a place of forced merriment. You notice that many of the men entering these houses are wearing the livery of noble families or the expensive woolens of wealthy merchants. They have crossed the river to do things they would never dare to do in their own parishes. You stop in front of a house known as the Bell. The door is thick oak, reinforced with iron studs. To your modern eyes, it looks more like a prison than a place of recreation. You hesitate, but the cold wind whipping off the river pushes you forward. You push the door open and step inside. The transition is jarring. The damp chill of the night is replaced by a wall of heat. A massive fire roars in a central hearth, but there is no chimney, only a hole in the roof that does a poor job of venting the smoke. Your eyes immediately begin to sting and water. The floor is covered in rushes, a layer of dried grass and herbs intended to mask the smells. However, the rushes have not been changed in weeks. Beneath the top layer lies a fermented compost of spilled ale, discarded grease, and the filth brought in on the boots of every patron who has entered tonight. Standing by the fire is the mistress of the house, the abbess. She is a formidable woman with a face like etched stone and a set of heavy iron keys hanging from her belt. She eyes you with a predatory curiosity. She can tell you are not from around here. Your clothes are too fine, your skin is too clear, and you have the look of someone who has never had to fight for a crust of bread. To her, you are not a guest. You are a mark. She gestures for you to sit at a long, scarred wooden table. A girl brings you a leather tankard of ale. Do not drink it too quickly. This is not the filtered, regulated beer you are used to. This is small ale, thick and cloudy with yeast, often spiked with herbs like henbane or wormwood to give it a more potent kick. It is also the only thing safe to drink, as the water from the local wells is likely contaminated by the very business you are currently sitting in. As you sit there, trying to adjust to the dim, smoky light, you notice the regulations posted on the wall, written in a cramped, official hand. The Bishop of Winchester has very specific rules for his geese. No woman is allowed to work on a holy feast day. No woman is allowed to have a boyfriend or a husband who lives off her earnings. And, perhaps most importantly for you, no man is allowed to be kept inside against his will, provided he has paid his debts. But as you look around at the shadowed corners of the room, you realize that the law is a thin veil. You see a man in the corner being quietly searched by a pair of heavy-set men while a woman distracts him with a song. You see the glint of a dagger tucked into the belt of a patron who looks like he has not slept in days. You realize that the red lamp outside was not just a signal of welcome. It was a warning. In this room, your status in the outside world means nothing. If you have gold in your purse, you are a target. If you have no gold, you are a nuisance to be thrown into the freezing mud of the street. You are surrounded by people who have been pushed to the absolute edge of society, living in a world where life is cheap and the next morning is never guaranteed. The abbess leans over the table, her breath smelling of sour wine and onions. She asks you what you are looking for. You realize that you cannot simply turn around and walk out. To do so would be an insult, and in Bankside, an insult is often answered with a length of cold steel. You are trapped by the social gravity of the place. You have entered the heart of the stews, and the night has only just begun. The heat of the fire, the stinging smoke, and the heavy, fermented air start to make your head swim. You are about to find out that the physical discomfort is the least of your worries. The real danger of Bankside does not come from the bishop or his laws. It comes from the fact that once you step into the circle of the red lamp, you are no longer a person. You are merely a commodity in a market that never sleeps. You step off the southern end of London Bridge, leaving the gates of the city proper behind you. As your boots hit the churned mud of Southwark, the atmosphere changes instantly. Behind you lies the walled authority of London, with its guilds, its strict curfews, and its suffocating morality. Before you lies the liberty of the clink. This is a place where the rules of the city do not apply. You are standing in a legal loophole that covers 70 acres of marshy riverbank, a territory where the king has no jurisdiction and the mayor has no power. This land belongs to one man, the Bishop of Winchester. You might expect a landscape owned by a high-ranking prince of the church to be a place of quiet prayer and holy sanctuary. But as you look around, you realize it is anything but. The air is thick with the smell of roasting meat, cheap ale, and the stagnant stench of the Thames at low tide. This is the capital of vice. You move deeper into the borough, and the first thing you notice is the noise. It is a cacophony of barking dogs, shouting ferrymen, and the rhythmic thumping of music coming from the many houses that line the riverbank. These are the stews, the licensed brothels of medieval London. You see the signs hanging over the doors, not with names, but with painted images like a boar's head, a cross keys, or a cardinal's hat. The irony is not lost on you. These houses are officially sanctioned by the church. The very men who preach against the sins of the flesh from the pulpits of St. Paul's Cathedral are the ones collecting the rent from these establishments. You are witnessing a system of managed sin, a pragmatic and profitable arrangement that has lasted for centuries. The term stews comes from the original purpose of these buildings. They were public bathhouses, a luxury that Londoners craved in an age where personal hygiene was a constant struggle. But as you look at the men slipping through the doors, you know they are not there for a simple scrub in a tub of hot water. The steam provides the perfect cover for what the bishop calls a necessary evil. In the eyes of the church, if you cannot eliminate the fire of human lust, it is better to contain it in one place than to let it burn down the whole of society. It is a cynical philosophy that places you, as a visitor or a resident, into a carefully regulated machine. You walk past a group of women standing in the doorways. They are wearing brightly colored dresses, their hair uncovered in a way that marks them instantly as outsiders to respectable society. These women are known locally as Winchester geese. It is a cruel nickname. Because they work on the bishop's land, they are under his protection or at least his regulation. You see the bishop's officers, the bailiffs, patrolling the muddy streets with heavy wooden staves. They are not here to stop the trade, but to ensure the bishop gets his cut and that the rules are followed. These rules, established by King Henry II way back in 1161, are posted on the walls of the local manor. You stop to read them, and you realize how controlled this world truly is. No brothel keeper may keep a woman against her will. No woman who is pregnant or has the perilous burning disease may work. No man may be pulled into a house by his cloak. No woman may be kept if she has a husband, and most importantly, no house may open on holy days. You find it hard to believe that these rules offer any real protection. You see a bailiff shouting at a woman who is trying to leave a house with her meager belongings. He demands to see her tally. Every penny she earns is recorded, and a massive portion goes to the householder, who in turn pays the bishop for the privilege of the license. You realize that the Winchester goose is a bird in a cage, and the bars of that cage are made of legal parchment and religious hypocrisy. The physical environment of the stews is as unforgiving as the laws that govern them. You feel the dampness of the river seeping into your bones. The houses are built right over the open sewers that drain into the Thames. When the tide comes in, the water backs up, flooding the lower floors with filth. You watch a group of wealthy young men, perhaps students of the law or sons of merchants, paying a ferryman to row them across from the city. They laugh and joke, treating this place like a playground. To them, the liberty of the clink is a temporary escape from their responsibilities. But for the women working inside those houses, there is no escape. They are bound by debt, by social stigma, and by the physical geography of the marsh. You follow a group into one of the larger houses, the one marked by the sign of the bell. The interior is a maze of small, cramped rooms separated by thin timber walls and hanging sheets of coarse wool. The heat is oppressive, generated by the large vats of water simmering in the kitchens for the baths. The air is heavy with the scent of lavender and rosewater, used in a futile attempt to mask the smell of unwashed bodies and the damp rot of the building's foundations. You hear the sounds of laughter, but it is a sharp, brittle sound. You hear the clatter of dice on wooden tables and the low murmur of negotiations. Here, everything has a price. You see a man handing over a silver groat to the madam, a formidable woman with keys jingling at her waist. She directs him toward a narrow staircase, and you realize that even the privacy of these rooms is an illusion. The walls have ears, and the bailiffs are always listening for a fight that might threaten the bishop's revenue. As you stand in the flickering light of the tallow candles, you begin to understand the true nature of this licensed sin. It is not about freedom or pleasure. It is about the commodification of the human body under the watchful eye of the state and the church. You think about the paradox of the Bishop of Winchester. On Sundays, he sits on his throne in the cathedral, surrounded by incense and gold, praying for the souls of his flock. On Mondays, his agents are here in Southwark, counting the coins earned from the very acts he condemns. If you stay here long enough, the hypocrisy begins to feel like a heavy weight in your chest. You walk back toward the river, looking for a way out of this labyrinth. You pass a small, unremarkable patch of ground surrounded by a high fence. There are no headstones here, no markers of any kind. This is the Crossbones graveyard. Because the Winchester geese work in a trade that the church considers sinful, they are denied the right to a Christian burial in consecrated ground. They may work on the bishop's land, they may pay the bishop's taxes, and they may enrich the bishop's coffers, but when they die, they are cast out. They are buried in unconsecrated soil, forgotten by the institution that profited from their lives. You stand by the fence for a moment, listening to the wind whistling through the gaps in the wood. It is a sobering reminder of what happens when you are no longer useful to the system. The sun begins to set, casting long, bloody shadows across the mud of Southwark. The city across the river looks like a different world, its spires glowing in the dying light. You realize that the liberty of the clink is not just a place, it is a mirror. It reflects the dark side of medieval society, the parts that everyone knows exist but no one wants to admit to. It is a world where the law is a tool for profit and where the church is the ultimate landlord. You feel a desperate urge to cross the bridge, to return to the world of clear rules and familiar boundaries. But as you turn to leave, you see a fresh boatload of visitors arriving at the stairs. They are eager, curious, and completely unaware of the reality of the world they are entering. You want to warn them, to tell them that the bishop's protection is a thin veil over a brutal reality. But you know they wouldn't listen. In the liberty of the clink, the illusion of choice is the most powerful commodity of all. You leave the mud of the stews behind, but the smell of the damp river and the sight of the Crossbones graveyard will stay with you long after you have crossed back into the safety of the city walls. You have not yet even stepped through the heavy oak door of the brothel, but your body is already screaming at you to turn back. It is not just the fear of the unknown or the shadow of the law that haunts you. It is the air itself. To understand why you would not last a night in a medieval brothel, you must first understand the atmosphere of Southwark. In the 21st century, we have forgotten what the world truly smells like. We live in a world of filtered air, citrus-scented soaps, and sanitized surfaces. But here, on the south bank of the Thames, the air is not a transparent gas. It is a thick, humid, and visible entity that you have to push your way through. It is a physical weight on your chest. Imagine the worst garbage dump you have ever passed on a scorching summer afternoon. Now, multiply that by 1,000 and add the sharp, metallic tang of blood and the stinging chemical burn of ammonia. This is the symphony of stench that defines the liberty of the clink. As you stand in the narrow, mud-choked alleyway, the first thing that hits you is the sheer variety of the rot. Medieval London was a city of smells, but Southwark was its dumping ground. Because this area sat outside the formal jurisdiction of the City of London, it became the designated home for every industry that was too foul, too noisy, or too dangerous for the polite society across the bridge. To your left, just down the lane, is a tannery. You can smell it before you see the smoke rising from its vats. Tanning leather in the Middle Ages was one of the most revolting processes known to man. To soften the hides of cows and pigs, the tanners soak them in massive pits filled with a mixture of stale human urine and dog feces. They call the dog waste pure, a dark irony that is lost on your watering eyes. The ammonia from the urine is so strong it makes your throat seize. It is a sharp, biting odor that clings to your hair and permeates your clothing within seconds. This scent does not just float on the breeze. It anchors itself to the moisture in the air, creating a damp, chemical fog that never truly dissipates. As the wind shifts, the sharp bite of the tannery is replaced by the cloying, heavy sweetness of the tallow chandlers. These are the men who make candles and soap from animal fat. They boil down the remnants of the slaughterhouses, the gristle, the entrails, and the rancid suet that no one would dare eat. The smell is greasy and thick. You can almost feel the rendered fat coating the inside of your lungs. It is a heavy, organic rot that suggests death in its most industrial form. This is the bass note of the Southwark air, a constant low thrum of decaying biological matter that provides the foundation for everything else. Then there is the river. You might think the Thames would offer a reprieve, a source of fresh water and a cool breeze. You would be wrong. In the medieval period, the Thames is the city's primary sewer. At low tide, the riverbanks are exposed, revealing a thick, black sludge composed of centuries of human waste, dead livestock, and household refuse. The mud of the bankside is a living thing, bubbling with the gases of decomposition. When the sun hits those mudflats, the stench rises in a visible shimmer. It is a swampy, sulfurous odor that smells of ancient, undisturbed filth. Because the brothels are built right on the edge of this tidal muck, the dampness of the river is inside the walls. It creates a permanent state of mildew and mold that grows in the corners of every room, adding a musty, earthy undertone to the industrial assault on your senses. You try to take a shallow breath through your mouth, but the taste is even worse. The air tastes of coal smoke and wood ash. Everyone in Southwark is burning something. Whether it is a baker's oven, a brewer's copper, or a simple hearth in a crowded tenement, The smoke hangs low under the heavy London clouds. It traps the smells of the street, pressing them down toward the ground. You are walking through a soup of carbon and stench. Now look down at your feet. You are trying to navigate what the locals call a kennel. This is not a place for dogs, but rather the open gutter that runs down the center of the street. In theory, it is meant to carry rainwater away to the river. In practice, it is a slow-moving river of liquid filth. Every household in this district disposes of its waste by simply throwing it out the window. Vegetable peelings, dishwater, and the contents of the nightly chamber pots all end up in the kennel. It sits there, fermenting in the heat, until a heavy rain washes it toward the Thames. You have to balance on the narrow strips of dry ground near the building walls. But even then, you are stepping over piles of horse manure and the occasional bloated carcass of a rat. The smell of human excrement is so pervasive that after an hour, your brain tries to shut off your sense of smell entirely. But the air is so thick you can still feel it against your skin. As you finally approach the door of the brothel, a new layer is added to the symphony. This is the smell of the people. In the 14th and 15th centuries, the concept of a daily shower does not exist. Most people own 2 sets of clothes if they are lucky, one for working and one for the Sabbath. These clothes are made of heavy wool and linen, materials that are excellent at trapping sweat and body oils. You are surrounded by hundreds of bodies that have not been fully submerged in water for months. The scent is a pungent, sour musk. It is the smell of unwashed armpits, stale perspiration, and the yeasty aroma of skin infections. But wait, the brothel tries to fight back. As you stand in the doorway, you catch a whiff of something sharp and floral. It is not pleasant. To mask the overwhelming odor of the district, the keepers of the stews use heavy perfumes and aromatic herbs. They strew the floors with dried rushes, mint, and lavender. On the surface, this sounds lovely. In reality, it is a disaster. The fresh rushes on the floor quickly become damp and mix with the mud and beer spilled by the patrons. They begin to rot from the bottom up, creating a layer of fermenting vegetation beneath your feet. The perfumes are even worse. They use civet and musk, scents derived from animal glands that are incredibly potent. Instead of covering the smell of the tannery and the open sewer, the perfume simply sits on top of it. It is a clashing, discordant mix of rosewater and rotting entrails. It is enough to make your stomach do a slow, painful roll. Inside the entryway, the air becomes still and even more concentrated. There is no ventilation here. The windows are small, covered with horn or oiled cloth rather than glass, and they are kept tightly shut to keep out the damp river air. The heat of 20 bodies in a small space raises the temperature, making the humidity almost unbearable. You can smell the stale ale that has soaked into the floorboards over decades. You can smell the greasy smoke from the tallow candles that flicker in the dark corners, releasing a soot that stains the walls and fills your nostrils with the scent of burnt fat. You realize that you cannot escape it. In your own time, if you encounter a foul smell, you can walk away. You can go into a different room or step outside for fresh air. But here, there is no such thing as fresh air. The stench is the environment. It is the very fabric of Southwark. To live here, to work here, or to spend a night in one of these rooms is to accept that your entire world will be defined by the scent of decay. Your skin will smell of it. Your hair will carry it. Even the bread you eat will seem to taste of the sulfur and the smoke. As you stand there, your eyes burning and your lungs protesting every breath, you begin to understand the physical toll this takes. This is not just an unpleasant experience. This is an assault on your nervous system. The medieval people around you seem unbothered. their senses dulled by a lifetime of exposure. But for you, a traveler from a sanitized future, the Southwark air is a barrier as thick as any stone wall. It is a warning. It tells you that this is a place where the basic comforts of humanity have been stripped away, replaced by the raw, unwashed reality of a world that is rotting even as it lives. You take one more breath, a deep, shuddering inhalation that fills your head with the scent of the tanning pits and the river mud, and you realize that the night has only just begun. The symphony of stench is just the opening movement. The true test of your endurance lies deeper inside the flickering shadows of the stew house, where the air is the least of your concerns. You step across the uneven threshold, and the first thing that hits you is not the smell or the sight of the women, but a sound. It is a sharp, rhythmic clinking of metal on wood that cuts through the low murmur of voices and the crackle of a dying hearth. This is the heartbeat of the stew house. At a small, scarred table near the inner door sits the steward. He is the man who ensures the gears of this miserable machine keep turning, and his eyes are currently fixed on your belt. He does not see a guest or a weary traveler. He sees a collection of silver and copper coins that need to be redistributed into his own heavy iron box. The steward is usually a man of thick neck and callous hands, often a retired soldier or a thug whose soul has been thoroughly scoured away by years of witnessing the worst of human nature. He is the gatekeeper of your evening, and your first lesson in medieval economics is about to begin. You reach into your leather pouch, your fingers brushing against the few groats and pennies you have left. In a world where a skilled laborer might earn 3 pence a day, the price of entry here is a calculated blow to your finances. But the price you pay at the door is only the beginning of the extraction. As you drop your coins onto the table, the steward slides them away with a practiced flick of his wrist. This is the steward's cut. In the famous stews of Southwark, just across the river from the city of London, the system was remarkably bureaucratic. These houses were actually regulated by the Bishop of Winchester. Because of this, the women who worked here were known derisively as Winchester geese. You might find it ironic that a man of the cloth held the deeds to these dens of vice, but the church knew that sin was a steady industry. They could not stop it, so they taxed it. The steward is the final link in a long chain of hands, all reaching for a piece of the profit generated in these damp, dark rooms. You watch as the steward nods toward a narrow, winding staircase. The wood is slick with a film of grease and spilled ale. Every step you take upward feels like a descent into a deeper kind of trap. If you think the price you paid at the door was steep, consider the economy of the women you are about to meet. In a medieval brothel, the concept of a salary does not exist. The woman waiting for you in the shadows above is likely renting her very existence from the man downstairs. She pays for the room. She pays for the bed. She pays for the dress she is wearing, which is often a gaudy, stained thing designed to look expensive from a distance in the flickering light of a tallow candle. She even pays for the tallow candle itself. This is the crushing weight of the steward's cut. By the time the landlord, the bishop, the steward, and the local watchman have taken their share, the woman who has provided the service is often left with nothing but debt. It is a cycle of indentured servitude that ensures she can never leave. If she tries to run, the steward's thugs will find her. If she falls ill, her debt only grows. You are not just renting a body for the night. You are participating in a financial system designed to consume the poor from the inside out. The steward follows you with his gaze as you reach the landing. The air up here is thinner and warmer, trapped by the low ceilings and the lack of windows. The hallways are little more than partitions made of wattle and daub, which is essentially mud and straw smeared over wooden slats. You can hear everything. The walls do not offer privacy. They only offer a suggestion of it. You hear the heavy breathing of men in the next stall, the sharp cough of a woman who has likely been breathing in coal smoke and damp rot for years, and the constant, scurrying sound of rats in the thatch above your head. You are led to a chamber that is barely large enough for a single bed. Calling it a chamber is a kindness. It is a cell. There is no furniture other than a rickety wooden frame strung with sagging ropes. On top of these ropes lies a thin, lumpy mattress stuffed with straw. If you were expecting silk sheets and soft pillows, you have been misled by modern fiction. This straw is old. It has been used by dozens, perhaps hundreds of men before you. It is a miniature ecosystem. It is damp to the touch, retaining the moisture of the humid air and the various fluids of the human experience. As you sit down, a cloud of dust and the sharp, acidic scent of urine rises from the fibers. This is your bed for the night, and you have paid dearly for the privilege of sitting on it. The woman who enters the room after you does not look like a queen of the night. Up close, away from the deceptive shadows of the main hall, the reality of her life is etched into her skin. She is likely younger than you, though the grime in the lines of her face makes her look decades older. Her hair is matted, and her breath smells of cheap, sour wine, which many workers use to numb the boredom and the physical pain of their trade. She looks at you with a weary, practiced indifference. To her, you are just another task, another few pence that she will never truly see. She moves to light a single tallow candle. Tallow is made from rendered animal fat, usually from sheep or cows. Unlike the clean, sweet-smelling beeswax used in cathedrals, tallow burns with a thick, gray smoke that smells like a slaughterhouse. It drips heavy, oily wax that hardens into ugly gray lumps on the floor. In the dim, wavering light, the room looks even smaller. You notice the stains on the walls where the damp has seeped through the plaster. You see the holes in the floorboards where the steward has likely bored peepholes to ensure that no one is cheating him out of his share or lingering too long. Time is money in the stew house. The steward keeps a close eye on the duration of each visit. If you stay too long, you will hear a sharp rap on the wooden partition. That is the steward's reminder that your rent has expired. If you want more time, you must produce more coin. The pressure is constant. There is no romance here, only the cold, hard logic of the ledger. You realize that you are not a guest in a place of pleasure. You are a unit of currency moving through a digestive system of greed. Even the water provided for washing is a luxury that has its own price. It sits in a cracked ceramic basin in the corner, a dull, gray liquid that has likely been used by the previous occupant. There is no soap, only a rag that feels like sandpaper. To ask for fresh water would require another bribe to the steward, and even then, the water would be drawn from a well that sits dangerously close to the local cesspit. Every comfort has a cost, and every cost is inflated. You find yourself sitting on the edge of the bed, the straw crunching beneath you, realizing that the most dangerous thing in this brothel isn't the threat of a knife in the dark or the onset of a fever. It is the overwhelming, suffocating sense of being trapped in a machine that does not care if you live or die, so long as your purse is empty by morning. The steward is still downstairs, his ears tuned to the sound of every footfall on the stairs, waiting for the next man to walk through the door and begin the same cycle of renting his own misery. The physical discomfort of the room begins to weigh on you. The lack of air, the biting of fleas that have already discovered your ankles, and the oppressive smell of the tallow candle create a sense of claustrophobia that no amount of ale can drown out. You look at the door, but you know the steward is standing between you and the street. You have entered a contract the moment you crossed that threshold, a contract that is weighted entirely in favor of the house. You are a captive of the steward's cut, and the night has only just begun. The thin walls seem to pulse with the collective suffering of everyone trapped within them, a silent chorus of debts that can never be paid and lives that are being bartered away for the price of a few loaves of bread. You realize now that surviving a night here is not about your physical strength, but about your ability to endure the total degradation of your surroundings, while the man downstairs counts your coins by the light of a stolen candle. The air in Southwark is different than the air in London proper. It is thicker, heavy with the scent of the Thames mud at low tide and the acidic tang of the nearby tanneries. As you step off the main thoroughfare and into the maze of alleys that make up the liberty of the Clink, you feel the weight of the night pressing down on your shoulders. This is a place where the law of the city does not reach, governed instead by the Bishop of Winchester, whose iron grip on these streets ensures that the coin flows as freely as the cheap ale. You are no longer in the world of daylight and duty. You are in the stews. The building before you is a timber-framed structure that seems to lean over the narrow path, its upper floors jutting out like a furrowed brow. A sign hangs above the door, swaying in the damp wind. It might be the Cardinal Hat or perhaps the castle, but the name matters less than the light leaking through the cracks in the shutters. It is a dull, flickering orange, the color of cheap tallow and desperation. You push the door open, and the first thing that hits you is not a sight, but a wall of sound and heat. The common room is a chaotic tapestry of humanity. It is crowded, far more than you expected for this hour. The heat is stifling, a mixture of a roaring hearth and the body heat of dozens of men and women packed into a space meant for half their number. Your eyes take a moment to adjust to the haze of wood smoke and the steam rising from wet wool cloaks. There is a roar of conversation, a jagged mix of slurred songs, shouted arguments, and the occasional burst of high-pitched, hollow laughter. You are immediately approached by the woman who runs this establishment. In the slang of the day, she is the abbess, a title that mocks the very church that collects her taxes. She is older, her face a map of hard years spent in this district. Her skin is the color of parchment, stretched tight over high cheekbones, and her eyes are as sharp as a bird of prey. She does not welcome you with a smile. She looks you over with a clinical, cold efficiency, gauging the weight of your purse by the quality of your boots and the cut of your doublet. She speaks, but her voice is a gravelly rasp that barely carries over the din. She asks what you seek, though the answer is obvious. Here, everything is transactional. There is no pretense of romance or courtly love. You hand over several silver pennies, the price of entry and the first drink. She bites one of the coins to test its metal, then nods toward a narrow, winding staircase in the corner. The wood is slick with spilled beer and grease, and as you begin to climb, you feel the vibration of the room below rattling through the soles of your feet. The second floor is a different world. The noise of the common room is muffled, replaced by a suffocating silence broken only by the sound of muffled voices and the rhythmic creaking of floorboards behind thin partitions. The air here is stagnant. It smells of unwashed bodies, stale perfume made of rosewater and vinegar, and the sharp, metallic scent of blood. The hallway is narrow, lit only by a single candle stuck to a wall bracket with its own melted wax. You are led to a small door at the end of the passage. The abbess pushes it open and gestures for you to enter. This is the moment where the reality of the medieval brothel truly begins to sink in. The room is tiny, barely more than a cupboard. There is no furniture save for a low pallet bed stuffed with straw that rustles like a nest of rats when you move. The walls are lime-washed but stained with damp and soot. A single, high window is barred with iron, letting in a sliver of moonlight that only serves to highlight the dust motes dancing in the air. And then you see her. She is sitting on the edge of the pallet, her back to the wall. This is your first encounter, and it is nothing like the tales told by the poets. In the flickering light, she looks far younger than you anticipated, yet her eyes are ancient. There is no gold embroidery on her bodice, only frayed linen and a kirtle that has been patched so many times the original color is a mystery. As she stands, you notice the physical toll of her life. Her hair, which might have been a vibrant chestnut once, is thin and dull, pulled back with a scrap of ribbon. Her face is pale, save for a few spots of rouge that look like bruises in the dim light. When she moves, you see the slight tremor in her hands. This is not the seductive siren of legend. This is a person who has survived the famine of 1315, the recurring shadows of the plague, and the daily grind of a society that views her as a necessary evil. The interaction is brief and mechanical. She moves with a practiced weariness, her movements dictated by a routine that has long since stripped away any sense of intimacy. There is a profound sense of loneliness in this room, despite the dozens of people just on the other side of the walls. You realize that you are not here to find connection. You are here to witness the end point of poverty and the harsh realities of the medieval social order. You try to speak, perhaps to offer a kind word or to ask her name, but the words catch in your throat. The transactional nature of the encounter is a heavy veil between you. To her, you are just another set of boots on the stairs, another mouth to feed, another body to endure. To you, she is a living testament to the fragility of life in the 14th century. You see the faint, white scars of smallpox on her neck and the way she favors one leg, a sign of an old injury that never healed properly in the damp cold of the stews. Suddenly, a loud crash from the room next door breaks the silence. A man is shouting, his voice thick with rage, followed by the sound of something heavy hitting the floor. The woman doesn't even flinch. She has heard it all before. The violence of the stews is as constant as the ticking of a clock. It is a reminder that you are in a place where your safety is an illusion, held together only by the coins you paid at the door. You look around the small room again, and the sense of claustrophobia becomes almost unbearable. The ceiling is so low you have to stoop. The straw beneath your feet feels damp, and you wonder how many hundreds of people have stood where you are standing now. The shadows in the corners seem to move, shifting with every flicker of the dying candle. You realize that you are being watched not by eyes you can see, but by the very walls themselves. In a place like this, secrets are the only thing more valuable than silver. The woman reaches out, her fingers cold as ice against your skin. It is a gesture meant to initiate the business you paid for, but it feels like a warning. It is the touch of someone who has forgotten what it feels like to be warm. In this moment, the glamour of the historical past evaporates, leaving only the cold, hard truth of the human condition. You are in a place of shadows, where the light of the sun feels like a dream from another life. You understand now that the first encounter is not about the physical act. It is about the realization of what has been lost. It is the loss of dignity, the loss of safety, and the loss of the illusion that we are somehow different from those who came before us. The stews of Southwark are a mirror, reflecting the darkest parts of the medieval world. And as you stand in that cramped, stinking room, you realize that the night is only just beginning. The shadows are long, the walls are thin, and the man downstairs is already looking for the next person to climb those treacherous, grease-slicked stairs. You are a guest in a house of sorrows, and the exit feels further away than ever. Segments like this are not just about the history of a trade, but about the sensory reality of a vanished world. You feel the grit under your fingernails and the chill in your bones, knowing that for the person standing in front of you, there is no escape when the sun rises. This is the first encounter, a baptism in the cold reality of the medieval night. It is a world where every shadow hides a story, and most of those stories end in silence. For now, you are part of that silence, trapped in the flickering light of a stolen candle, waiting for the next sound to break the heavy, stagnant air of the stews. You settle onto the edge of the bed, and the first thing that hits you is the sound. It is not a loud sound, but a dry, rhythmic crunching that comes from deep within the mattress. This is not the soft, yielding embrace of a modern feather top or even the firm support of a cheap foam pad. Beneath you is a palliasse, a simple hempen sack stuffed tight with rye straw or marsh grass. As you shift your weight, the brittle stalks snap and groan, releasing a cloud of fine, gray dust that tastes of old summers and stagnant air. You try to remain still, but the silence of the room only makes the internal life of the mattress more audible. There is a rustle that has nothing to do with your own movements. It is the sound of things living, eating, and breeding just inches beneath your skin. You lean forward to adjust the single candle sitting on a scarred wooden stool beside you. This is a tallow candle, the cheapest light available in the medieval world, and it is a far cry from the clean, honey-scented beeswax used in the great cathedrals. This candle is made from rendered animal fat, the scraps of the slaughterhouse boiled down into a greasy, yellowish sludge. As the flame eats into the fat, it does not just provide light. It releases a thick, heavy stench that smells like a Sunday roast gone horribly wrong, a cloying scent of scorched suet that sticks to the back of your throat. The smoke is oily and black, coiling upward in a lazy spiral to stain the low timber ceiling with a fresh layer of soot. In this dim, flickering orange glow, the corners of the room do not disappear. They simply become more threatening, filled with shifting shadows that seem to pulse with the rhythm of the flame. You decide to lie back, hoping that the darkness will bring some measure of peace. But the moment your head touches the pillow, the true ordeal begins. The pillow is nothing more than a smaller version of the mattress, a coarse bag of straw that pokes at your ears and scratches your cheeks with every breath. You pull the blanket up to your chin, seeking warmth, but the fabric is a heavy, matted wool that has not been washed in a season. It is encrusted with the grime of the city and smells of stale vinegar, old sweat, and the metallic tang of the River Thames. It is heavy, pressing down on your chest like a leaden weight, yet it offers no real protection against the damp chill that rises from the floorboards. Then you feel it, tiny, sharp prick on your ankle. It is followed almost immediately by another on the back of your neck. You are not alone on this straw, and you never will be. The darkness is alive. Fleas, those tireless jumpers of the medieval underworld, have been waiting in the cool depths of the straw for the heat of a living body. They are joined by the lice, which cling to the seams of your heavy wool blanket, and the bedbugs, which have spent the daylight hours hiding in the crevices of the timber walls only to crawl out when they sense the carbon dioxide of your breath. You scratch at your arm, but it only makes the sensation worse. Every movement you make sends a fresh wave of movement through the bedding. You are not a guest in this room. You are a feast. You try to tell yourself that this is merely a physical nuisance, but your mind begins to race. In this era, the bite of a flea is not just an itch. It is a gamble with the very forces of life and death. You think of the stories of the great mortality, the way the sickness moves from the rats to the fleas and then to the blood of men. You feel a sudden, cold flare of panic in your chest, but there is nowhere to go. To leave the bed is to step onto a floor that is likely even more infested than the straw. As the hours crawl by, the sensory assault of the room begins to expand. The walls are thin, made of little more than timber slats and a mixture of mud, straw, and animal hair known as daub. They do nothing to block the sounds of the house. In the room next to yours, you can hear a man snoring, a wet, rattling sound that suggests a chest full of winter cold and fluid. You hear the rhythmic thud of a body hitting a wall, followed by a muffled curse in a language you do not recognize. Down the hallway, a woman laughs, but it is a sharp, jagged sound that holds no joy. It is the sound of someone performing a role for the 20th time that night. Below you, through the cracks in the floorboards, you hear the low murmur of the common room. The heavy thud of a wooden flagon hitting a table, the scraping of a bench, and the occasional burst of an argument that flares up and dies away just as quickly. You are surrounded by humanity in its most raw and unvarnished state. There is no privacy here, not even for your own thoughts. You realize that you are trapped in a box of noise and itchiness, and the air is becoming increasingly difficult to breathe. The tallow candle finally reaches its end. The wick drowns in the pool of liquid fat, sputtering and hissing as it dies. The light vanishes with a final, desperate flare, leaving you in a darkness so absolute it feels physical, like a heavy cloth pressed against your eyes. The smell of the extinguished wick lingers, a sharp, acrid smoke that fills the room and makes you cough. Now you are truly blind. Your world has shrunk to the size of the mattress and the sensations of your own skin. You try to find a position that does not result in a straw stalk poking into your ribs, but it is impossible. The mattress has settled into a series of hard lumps and deep hollows. You roll onto your side, only to feel the dampness of the wall. The stews are built near the water, and the moisture seeps through the timber, bringing with it the smell of the river mud and the waste of the city. It is a cold, cloying damp that seems to sink into your bones, making your joints ache with a dull, persistent throb. In the total darkness, your other senses become hyper-alert. You hear the skittering of claws across the floorboards. Rats. They are a constant presence in the stews, drawn by the smell of food and the warmth of the bodies packed into the small rooms. You hear them sniffing at the base of the stool where your candle sat. You pull your feet up, tucking them tightly under the heavy wool blanket, terrified that a stray toe might become a target for a hungry rodent. The scratch of their tiny feet on the wood is a reminder of just how thin the veneer of civilization is in this place. You lie there, staring into the blackness, and you realize that the greatest challenge of the night is not the fleas or the smell or the cold. It is the psychological weight of the place. Every sound, every itch, and every smell is a reminder of the vulnerability of the people who live and work here. You think of the women in the other rooms, the ones who spend every night in these same beds, facing the same pests and the same dangers. For you, this is a single night of endurance, a story to be told later. For them, this is the entire world. The heavy, stagnant air of the room feels as though it is filled with the echoes of 1,000 desperate nights, 1,000 moments of fear and exhaustion that have soaked into the very timbers of the house. The hours between midnight and dawn are the longest. Time seems to stretch and warp. You find yourself drifting into a shallow, fitful doze, only to be jerked awake by the sound of a shout from the street or the sudden, sharp pain of a fresh cluster of bites. In these moments of half-waking, the room feels smaller, the ceiling lower, as if the house itself is slowly exhaling, settling down on top of you. Eventually, the first hint of gray light begins to bleed through the cracks in the shutters. It is not the bright, hopeful light of a new day, but a dull, sickly glow that only serves to highlight the squalor of your surroundings. You see the dust motes dancing in the air, the greasy stains on the walls, and the discarded remains of the tallow candle. You are exhausted. Your skin is a map of red welts, and your lungs feel heavy with the soot of the night. You have survived the night in the medieval brothel, but as you stand up and feel the straw crunch beneath your feet one last time, you know that you are leaving a part of your comfort behind in that dark, infested room. The street outside may be dangerous and loud, but in this moment, the cold morning air of the city feels like the greatest luxury in the world. You are standing in the mud of a narrow street in 14th century London or perhaps Paris. You think your coin is all that matters here, but you are wrong. In this world, the coin in your pocket is only half the story. The other half is the fabric on your back and the title you carry in the eyes of the law. As you look at the flickering lanterns hanging over the doors of the district, you start to realize that the medieval brothel is not a place of equality. It is a pyramid, a rigid structure where the highest and the lowest rub shoulders in the dark but never truly meet as equals. You are about to discover that the medieval mind does not abandon its obsession with social rank just because it has entered a house of sin. Imagine you are wearing the clothes of a wealthy merchant. You have fine woolen hose, a doublet of heavy silk, and perhaps a small bit of fur lining your collar. As you approach a high-end establishment, one often referred to as a garden or a manor house of pleasure, the air changes. The stench of the open sewers fades slightly, replaced by the scent of wood smoke and perhaps a hint of expensive beeswax candles. The door is not just a piece of rotting wood hanging on a single hinge. It is solid oak. When you knock, you are not greeted by a bouncer who looks ready to slit your throat for a copper farthing. Instead, you meet a woman who speaks with the poise of a noblewoman. She is the madam, but in these circles she might be called an abbess, a mocking title that hints at the secret world you have just entered. Inside this velvet world, the hierarchy is absolute. You look around and see men who, by day, are the pillars of the community. You see the younger sons of knights, men who have no land of their own but carry the pride of their bloodline like a weapon. They are here for more than just physical release. They are here for the illusion of courtly love, a performance of chivalry that is bought and paid for. In these upper rooms, the women are often educated. They can sing, they can play the lute, and they can converse about the latest poems or the politics of the royal court. For you, the wealthy guest, the night is an elaborate play. You are not just a customer. You are a patron. But do not be fooled by the soft cushions or the wine served in pewter instead of cracked clay. The rules are still deadly. If a man of higher rank than you enters and desires the room you occupy, you do not argue. You bow, you gather your things, and you move. To refuse a nobleman in such a place is not just bad manners. It is an invitation to a duel you will not survive. Then, there is the most surprising layer of the velvet hierarchy. You notice a man in the corner, his head covered by a deep hood, but as he turns, the candlelight catches the smooth skin of his tonsure. He is a priest. Perhaps he is a monk or a high-ranking official of the church. In your modern mind, this might seem like a scandal that would bring down the entire cathedral, but in the medieval world, it is a known secret. The church officially condemns these houses, but the men of the church are some of the most consistent clients of the high-end brothels. They have the gold, and they have the education to appreciate the refined atmosphere. They are part of the elite hierarchy, and their presence is protected by a wall of silence. You learn quickly that in this room, you do not look a man of the cloth in the eye. You allow him his anonymity, and in return, the fragile peace of the establishment is maintained. But now, imagine the scene shifts. You are no longer in silk. You are wearing a rough tunic of undyed wool that smells of sweat and the workshop where you spend 14 hours a day. You are the vermin of this social ladder, the common laborer, the sailor, or the apprentice with 3 pennies to his name. You cannot even walk down the street where the oak doors are. The guards would beat you back into the mud before you reach the threshold. Your world is the stews. These are the bathhouses that have long since abandoned any pretense of hygiene. You walk into a low-end stew house, and the sensory assault is immediate. The air is thick with the smell of cheap ale, unwashed bodies, and the damp, cloying scent of moldy straw. There is no music here, only the sound of shouting and the rhythmic thumping of feet on uneven floorboards. In this part of the hierarchy, there is no courtly love. There is only the transaction. You are surrounded by men who are desperate, angry, and often drunk on the kind of wine that tastes more like vinegar than grapes. Here, the hierarchy is not determined by birth or title, but by raw strength. If you are small or look weak, your coin will be taken from you before you even reach a room. The rooms in these lower houses are not rooms at all. They are often just stalls, separated by thin, hanging blankets that do nothing to muffle the sounds of the dozens of other people packed into the space. You realize that you are sharing this experience with the dregs of the city. You see the soldiers who have just returned from a campaign, men who are traumatized and violent, looking for a way to forget the blood they have seen. You see the day laborers who have saved for a month just to escape their miserable lives for an hour. In this crowded, dark basement, you are all part of the same churning mass of humanity. This is the base of the pyramid, and it is a place where life is cheap and the law rarely ventures. You start to understand that the danger of the medieval brothel changes depending on where you sit in this hierarchy. At the top, the danger is political. A wrong word to a nobleman or a slight against a bishop can result in your disappearance or a lawsuit that ruins your family. At the bottom, the danger is physical and immediate. A knife in the ribs, a disease that will rot your bones in a year, or a brawl that ends with the city watch dragging you to a cold stone cell. You see how the girls are treated differently as well. In the velvet houses, they are protected assets, guarded like jewels because they bring in the gold of the elite. In the stews, they are disposable. It is a harsh, cold reality that makes your skin crawl. As you stand in the middle of this social divide, you see the bridge between the two worlds. These are the professional go-betweens, the men who procure and the men who protect. They are the ones who know exactly who is in which house at any given time. They are the keepers of the hierarchy. They ensure that a merchant does not accidentally wander into a tavern meant for thieves. And they make sure that a nobleman's reputation remains untarnished even as he indulges in every vice imaginable. You realize that the entire system is built on this rigid separation. The medieval person believes that the universe has an order, and even in the depths of the red light district, that order must be respected. You feel the weight of this hierarchy as you move through the city. It is not just about the money you spend. It is about the space you are allowed to occupy. If you are a commoner, the velvet world is a dream you will never touch, a place of mystery and luxury that might as well be on the moon. If you are a noble, the world of the vermin is a terrifying, filthy abyss that you only glimpse from the window of a moving carriage. But here, in the shadows of the night, These two worlds exist only a few streets apart, separated by the invisible but unbreakable walls of class. You look at your hands and wonder where you would fit. Would you have the courage to navigate the polite, deadly dances of the high-end manners, where a slip of the tongue could be your end? Or would you have the toughness to survive the raw, brutal reality of the stews, where your only protection is your own fists? You begin to see that surviving a night in a medieval brothel is not just about avoiding the plague or escaping a fire. It is about knowing your place in a world that has no mercy for those who forget who they are. The hierarchy is the skeleton of the medieval world. It holds everything up, and it keeps everything in its place. As the night deepens, the lines between the velvet and the vermin seem to blur in the darkness. But they are still there, etched into the very stones of the city. You can hear the distant laughter of a lord from a high balcony and the guttural shout of a drunkard from a cellar. They are both seeking the same thing, but they will never find it in the same way. The hierarchy is the ultimate master of the house, and it demands its due from everyone who enters, whether they arrive in a carriage or on bleeding feet. You realize then that the medieval brothel is perhaps the truest reflection of the world outside, a place where the human soul is laid bare, but the human rank is never forgotten. You pull your cloak tighter around your shoulders, trying to shield yourself from the damp draft that whistles through the cracks in the timber walls. The air in this part of the house is different. It is heavier, thick with the scent of tallow smoke and the metallic tang of old coins. You are no longer in the rooms of the women, nor are you in the common area where the ale flows and the laughter sounds forced. You have entered the inner sanctum of the man they call the abbot. You should not be here, but in a place like this, there is nowhere to truly hide. As you stand in the flickering light of a single, sputtering candle, you see him. He is sitting behind a massive table made of scarred oak, his silhouette casting a long, distorted shadow against the wattle and daub wall. The title of abbot is a piece of dark, local irony that you quickly begin to understand. In the district of Southwark, just across the river from the city of London, the land is owned by the Bishop of Winchester. Because these brothels, or stews as they are called, sit on church land, the keepers have adopted ecclesiastical nicknames. They call the women his canonesses or the Winchester geese, and he is their abbot. But as he looks up from his ledger, you see there is nothing of the spirit in his eyes. He is a man of flesh, bone, and a terrifying cold pragmatism. The abbot is the law in this house. While the king has his courts and the bishop has his tithes, the people within these walls have only the abbot and his heavy hand. He is the manager, the protector, the pimp, and the judge all rolled into one. You notice the way his knuckles are thickened with scar tissue and how a heavy ring of iron keys hangs from his belt, clinking softly whenever he moves. Those keys represent more than just locked doors. They represent the absolute control he exerts over every soul under this roof. You might wonder why the women do not simply walk away. You might imagine that the door is always open and the street is just a few steps away. But as you watch the abbot dip his quill into a pot of ink and scratch a line into his book, you realize that the walls of this brothel are not made of wood and stone alone. They are made of debt. This is his primary tool of discipline. Before a woman can even begin to earn for herself, she is already drowning. She owes the abbot for her room. She owes him for the thin mattress she sleeps on. She owes him for the dress on her back, for the water she drinks, and for the very air she breathes within these walls. The abbot is a master of the tally. For every penny a woman earns from a traveler or a local merchant, the abbot takes his share first. He takes a cut for the rent, a cut for the protection he provides against rowdy drunks, and a cut for the fines he imposes for the slightest infractions. Did she stay in her room too long? That is a fine. Did she pick a fight with another woman over a piece of bread? That is another fine. By the time the sun rises, she often finds herself owing more than she started with. This is the invisible chain that keeps the Winchester geese from flying away. But the discipline is not always so subtle as a mark in a ledger. You hear a sharp sound from the hallway behind you, the heavy thud of a boot against wood. One of the abbot's men, a brute with a broken nose and hands the size of dinner plates, stalks past you. He does not even acknowledge your presence. He is looking for someone. This is the physical reality of the abbot's rule. If the debt does not keep you in line, the threat of violence will. The rules of the stews are ancient and strict, codified by the Bishop of Winchester himself in the year 1161. These ordinances are not meant to protect the women. They are meant to ensure the abbot keeps his profit and the bishop keeps his peace. You watch as the abbot stands up, his massive frame blocking out the light. He speaks in a low, gravelly voice that carries the weight of a death sentence. He is talking about a woman who tried to keep a gift from a client, a small silver brooch that she hoped to hide under her floorboards. To you, it seems like a small thing, a tiny spark of hope in a dark world. To the abbot, it is theft. It is a violation of the order of things. In his world, nothing belongs to the women. Not their bodies, not their time, and certainly not a piece of silver. The punishment for such defiance is swift and serves as a lesson for everyone else. You might think of a prison as a place far away, but for those in the stews, the prison is right here. The abbot has the power to throw a woman into the hole, a cramped, dark space beneath the floor where the river water seeps in at high tide. Or perhaps he will send her to the clink, the local prison owned by the bishop. If she is lucky, she might only face the cucking stool, a chair used to plunge women into the freezing, filthy waters of the Thames until they are half drowned and thoroughly humiliated. You feel a chill that has nothing to do with the night air. The abbot is not just a man, he is a system. He is the personification of a world that views these women as both necessary and disposable. He enforces the rule that no woman can have a husband or a lover outside of the trade, because a husband might protect her or take her away from the abbot's profit. He ensures that they do not wash too often, for the laws of the stews actually forbid certain types of hygiene, fearing it would make the brothels too much like a place of luxury rather than a place of penance. As you stand there, you realize that your own position is incredibly precarious. If you were to cross him, if you were to interfere with his business or try to show a shred of genuine compassion to one of his canonesses, that heavy hand would turn on you. You are a guest, perhaps, or a stranger passing through, but in the abbot's domain, everyone is a subject. He knows every entrance and exit. He knows which watchmen can be bought with a flagon of ale and which ones require a heavier bribe. He knows who is coming and who is going, and he knows exactly how much blood he can squeeze from a stone. The abbot returns to his seat and picks up a stack of small, wooden tallies. These are the records of the day's transactions. Each notch represents a human encounter, a moment of intimacy bought with coin and regulated by fear. He looks at them with the same detached interest a shepherd might show when counting sheep, though he cares far less for the welfare of his flock. To him, the women are simply assets to be managed, used until they are broken and then replaced. You hear a muffled cry from somewhere deep in the house, followed by the sound of a door slamming shut. No one rushes to help. No one even looks up. The discipline of the abbot has done its work. It has stripped away the impulse to resist. It has replaced hope with a grinding, daily struggle for survival. You see a woman pass by the door of the office. Her eyes are downcast, her shoulders slumped. She does not look at the abbot, and he does not look at her. There is no need for words between them. She knows the rules. She knows the price of breaking them. And she knows that as long as she is within these walls, he is the only God she is allowed to serve. The flickering candle on the abbot's desk finally gutters out, leaving the room in a thick, oppressive darkness. You can still hear the scratching of his quill in the dark, the sound of debts being recorded and lives being measured in pennies. It is a sound that will continue long after you have left this place, a rhythm of exploitation that has beaten in the heart of the city for centuries. You realize then that the true horror of the medieval brothel is not just the filth or the disease. It is the cold, calculated discipline of the man in the shadows, the abbot who ensures that for the women of the stews, there is truly no way out. You back away from the door, your heart hammering against your ribs. The darkness of the hallway feels like a physical weight, pressing in on you from all sides. You want to run, to find the bridge and cross back to the world where the laws are written on parchment and spoken in courts. But you know that the abbot's reach is longer than you imagine. His influence is woven into the very fabric of this society. He is the dark mirror of the church, the enforcer of a morality that is built on the broken spirits of the vulnerable. As you turn the corner and head back toward the flickering light of the common room, you carry the image of his cold, flinty eyes with you, a reminder that in this world, the hand that holds the keys is the only hand that matters. Your throat is parched. It is a dry, hacking thirst that seems to have settled deep in your chest, fueled by the dust of the floor rushes and the smoky, heavy air of the common room. You have been in this place for hours now, navigating the shadows and the suspicious glares of the inhabitants, and your body is finally demanding the most basic of human necessities. You look around the room, hoping to find a pitcher or a flask, but all you see are the stained wooden tankards of the men hunched over the tables. You realize with a sinking feeling that in this era, a simple glass of cool, clear water is not something you can just ask for. It is not something that simply exists as a right of your existence. In the heart of the medieval city, and especially within the walls of an establishment like this, water is not a utility. It is a luxury, a commodity, and more often than not, a slow-acting poison. If you were to ask the steward for a drink of water, he would likely look at you as if you had lost your mind. Why would you want water when there is ale to be sold? But let us say you persist. Let us say you find your way to the back of the building, near the cramped lean-to that serves as a kitchen. There, in the corner, sits a heavy wooden tun, its iron hoops rusted and its surface slick with a layer of damp moss. This is the house supply. There is no tap, no handle to turn. To get a drink, you must lift the heavy lid, and as you do, the smell hits you. It is not the smell of fresh rain or a mountain spring. It is the smell of a stagnant pond. It is flat, metallic, and faintly organic, like wet wool left too long in a dark cupboard. You peer inside, and the dim light reveals a liquid that is far from transparent. It is a dull, opaque gray, with tiny particles of silt and unidentifiable debris swirling in the depths. If you look closely, you might even see the frantic, jerky movements of tiny larvae or water fleas dancing near the surface. This is your liquid gold. This is what people in this neighborhood pay for, gallon by agonizing gallon. You see, the water in this barrel did not fall from the sky into a clean cistern, nor was it pumped from a deep, protected aquifer. It was likely hauled here by a professional water bearer, a man whose entire livelihood consists of carrying heavy wooden buckets from the public conduits or, heaven forbid, directly from the river. Think about the journey that water took to reach this barrel. If it came from the great conduit at Cheapside, the bearer had to wait in a line that stretched down the street, jostling with hundreds of others while horses and livestock passed by, shedding hair and waste into the mud. If the conduits were dry, as they often were during the hot summer months, the bearer would head to the river. In London, that meant the Thames. In the medieval period, the Thames was the city's main artery, but it was also its main sewer. Every butcher, every tanner, and every household along the banks dumped their offal and their night soil directly into those waters. This is the water that sits in the barrel before you. It is thick with the history of the city, and every sip is a gamble with your life. The cost of this water is why you see the steward guarding it so closely. To fill that barrel, the owner of this brothel has to pay a water bearer several pence a week, a sum that adds up quickly when profit margins are thin. In an economy where a gallon of small ale might cost a farthing, paying for the labor of transporting water feels like a heavy tax. This is why you will not find a bowl of fresh water in the rooms upstairs for washing. This is why the girls who work here rarely have the chance to scrub their skin. To the master of the house, using clean water for hygiene is a frivolous waste of money. It is a drain on the bottom line. If you were to insist on washing your face, you might be directed to a single, shallow stone basin in the corner of the courtyard. The water inside is used by everyone. You watch as a patron, red-faced and sweating, dips his hands into the gray liquid, splashes his face, and wipes his grime onto a shared rag that hangs from a hook. That rag hasn't been laundered in weeks. It is stiff with dried salt and body oils. The water in the basin is not replaced until it becomes a thick sludge. When you look at that basin, you are looking at a communal soup of bacteria. You are looking at the direct path for the spread of the flux, or what you would know as dysentery, and a host of other ailments that turn the stomach into a battlefield. This scarcity creates a physical reality that you are likely not prepared for. The lack of water means that everything in this brothel is covered in a layer of ancient, settled grit. It is on the furniture, it is in the fabric of the wall hangings, and most importantly, it is on the people. Without the ability to wash regularly, human skin becomes a landscape of its own. Pores clog, oils accumulate, and the scent of unwashed bodies becomes a heavy, physical presence that you can almost taste. It is not just the smell of sweat. It is the smell of skin that has not seen soap or fresh water in a month. It is a pungent, acidic aroma that clings to the back of your throat. You might think that the solution is simple. You will just drink the ale. And indeed, that is what everyone here does. The ale is brewed, which means the water was boiled, killing most of the more immediate threats to your life. But even the ale is a double-edged sword. To save money, the house likely serves what is known as small ale, the weak, watery byproduct of the second or third mashing of the grain. It is often sour, nearing the edge of turning into vinegar, and it is frequently adulterated. To give it more kick or a better color, some brewers might add ingredients you would find horrifying. Ivy berries, long pepper, or even more questionable substances were sometimes used to mask the taste of rot. As you stand there, staring at the stagnant water in the barrel, you realize that your thirst is a dangerous thing. Every choice you make to satisfy it comes with a price. If you drink the water, you risk a week of agonizing cramps and a fever that could take your life. If you drink the ale, you consume a cocktail of unknown quality that will leave your head spinning and your judgment clouded in a place where you need your wits to survive. And if you choose to wash, you are merely moving the filth of others onto your own skin. There is a deep psychological toll to this kind of deprivation. In your world, water is the great cleanser. It is how you start your day, how you reset yourself, how you feel human again after a long journey. Here, that reset button does not exist. You are forced to carry every bit of the city's filth with you, layered on your skin like a second coat of clothes. You feel heavy, greasy, and fundamentally unclean. The very air seems to stick to you. You begin to understand why the people here move the way they do, with a certain lethargy and a grim acceptance of their own physical state. When you cannot be clean, you stop caring about the dirt. The steward catches you staring at the water barrel and gives a short, barking laugh. He thinks you are judging the quality, and in a way you are. He mocks you, telling you that if you want the fine stuff, you should have stayed in the bishop's palace. Here you take what is given. He plunges a wooden dipper into the barrel, the wood scraping against the bottom and kicking up a cloud of brown sediment. He offers it to you, a mocking glint in his eye. The water in the dipper is turgid, with a thin, oily film shimmering on the surface like a rainbow in a gutter. You can see your own reflection in that film, distorted and pale, a ghost of the person you used to be before you entered this place. You shake your head and step back, the thirst in your throat now feeling like a secondary concern compared to the revulsion in your gut. You realize that you would not last a night here simply because your body is tuned to a different world. You are a creature of filtration, of sanitation, and of abundance. To survive here, you would have to break your own instincts. You would have to learn to swallow the grit, to ignore the smell of the river in your cup, and to accept that your skin will never feel truly fresh again. As you turn away from the kitchen, the weight of the environment feels even heavier. The cost of living in this world is paid in more than just coin. It is paid in the slow erosion of your health and the constant, nagging presence of thirst. The liquid gold of the medieval brothel is a cruel joke, a reminder that the most basic elements of life are often the hardest to keep pure. You head back toward the noise of the common room, your throat still burning, knowing that in this house, there is no such thing as a clean slate. Every drop of moisture, every sip of ale, and every splash of wash water carries the weight of the city, and tonight, that weight is beginning to feel unbearable. You decide that you have seen enough. The stench of the unwashed bodies, the flickering shadows of the tallow candles, and the overwhelming sense of decay have finally pushed you to the brink. You turn toward the door through which you entered, intending to slip back out into the night air of Southwark, even if that air is thick with the fog of the Thames and the smell of the tanneries. You reach for the heavy oak handle, expecting it to turn with a simple push. But it does not move. You pull. You rattle the frame. The wood is thick, reinforced with bands of rusted iron that feel cold and abrasive against your palms. A heavy, rhythmic thud echoes through the hallway as you realize the truth. The bolt has been thrown from the outside. You are no longer a guest. You are a resident for the night, and in this place, the difference between a resident and a prisoner is a distinction without a difference. You turn around to see a man standing at the end of the corridor. He is not the keeper of the house, but rather the muscle. In the parlance of the 14th century, he might be called a bully huff or a pander. He is broad-shouldered, wearing a leather jerkin that has seen better decades, and he is leaning against the wall with a casual, terrifying indifference. He watches you with eyes that have seen every level of desperation. To him, your sudden urge to leave is nothing new. It is an expected part of the evening ritual. He does not speak. He simply gestures toward the stairs, a silent command to return to the shadows. The realization begins to sink in. You are trapped in the stews. This is not merely an unfortunate circumstance of a sticky lock. This is a matter of law and profit. The Bishop of Winchester, who oversees this district, has very specific rules for the brothels that operate on his land. One of those rules dictates that once the sun goes down and the city gates of London across the bridge are locked, these houses become closed ecosystems. No one comes in, and more importantly, no one goes out until the bells of the morning ring for prime. You look around the narrow hallway, searching for another exit. The walls feel as though they are leaning inward. The timber framing is crooked, the result of centuries of the marshy ground shifting beneath the weight of the building. The plaster is peeling in long, jagged strips, revealing the lath beneath like the ribs of a dying animal. You see a small window at the far end of the passage, but as you approach it, your heart sinks. It is not a window meant for ventilation or for a view. It is a narrow slit, barely wider than your head, and it is crisscrossed with thick iron bars that have been hammered directly into the stone foundation. These bars are not there to keep thieves out. They are there to keep the inhabitants in. The medieval brothel is designed as a labyrinth of control. You walk back toward the main room, trying to appear calm, but your boots sound like thunderclaps on the warped floorboards. Every room you pass is a cell. Most do not even have doors, only heavy, moth-eaten tapestries that muffle the sounds of what is happening inside, but do offer no true privacy. The air is stagnant. There is no cross breeze here. The heat from the hearth downstairs rises and gets trapped in these upper floors, mingling with the humidity of the river to create a thick, cloying atmosphere that sticks to your skin. You feel a layer of grease and soot settling on your face, and there is no way to wash it off. You think about the girls you saw earlier. To you, this is a one-night nightmare. To them, this is the map of their entire existence. They are bound here not just by the locked doors and the iron bars, but by a web of debt that is as unbreakable as the stone walls. They owe the keeper for their room. They owe for their food. They owe for the very clothes they wear, which are often the only colorful things in this gray, grim world. If they try to leave, they are not just runaway workers. They are thieves accused of stealing the clothes on their backs. And out there, beyond the iron gates, the world is even less forgiving. You find a small stool in a corner and sit down, trying to steady your breathing. The sounds of the house are louder now that you are paying attention. You hear the low murmur of voices behind the curtains, the occasional sharp laugh that sounds more like a bark, and the constant, underlying scratching of rats in the walls. They are the only creatures that move freely through this building. You watch one scurrying across a ceiling beam, its eyes catching the light of a distant candle for a split second before it vanishes into the darkness. You envied its freedom. The structural reality of these buildings is one of intentional claustrophobia. They were built tall and narrow to save on ground rent, but also to ensure that there was only one way in and one way out. This was a tactical choice. It allowed the keeper to monitor every soul that entered and every coin that changed hands. It also allowed the city watch to contain the chaos. If a riot broke out in the stews, the authorities didn't need to patrol the streets. They simply locked the gates of the district and let the inhabitants simmer in their own violence. You wonder what would happen if a fire broke out. It is the great fear of every medieval city dweller. But in here, it is a death sentence. The walls are made of timber and straw, coated in layers of flammable tallow and wax from years of cheap lighting. The chimneys are often cracked and poorly maintained. If a spark hit one of those moth-eaten curtains, the entire floor would be an inferno in minutes. And the door is bolted from the outside. You look at the iron latch again, the metal cold and unyielding. You realize that you are at the mercy of the man in the leather jerkin, and he is likely already half asleep, his ears tuned only to the sound of coin or a scream that sounds expensive. The darkness of the night outside is absolute. There are no streetlights, only the moon if the clouds break. But here on the ground floor of the stews, the buildings are so close together that they blot out the sky. The alleyways between the houses are barely 2 feet wide, filled with a slurry of waste and mud that never dries. Even if you could break through the window bars, you would find yourself in a lightless crevice where the air is even fouler than it is inside. You are in a cage, and the cage is inside a slum, and the slum is outside the protection of the city walls. You try to imagine the world beyond this room. You think of the wide streets of the markets, the open fields beyond the city limits, the fresh wind blowing off the hills. But those things feel like a dream. The reality is the rough grain of the wooden stool, the dampness of your tunic, and the sound of the bolts sliding home. You realize that the night is only just beginning. The hours ahead will be measured not by the clock, but by the gradual fading of the candles and the slow cooling of the embers in the hearth. As the night deepens, the house changes. The earlier energy, fueled by ale and the desperate need for distraction, begins to sour. The laughter turns to arguments. The murmurs turn to silence. You feel the weight of the building pressing down on you. It is a structure built on the exploitation of the most vulnerable, and tonight you are part of that structure. You are a ghost in a machine designed to grind human dignity into dust. You lean your head against the wall, but the wood is damp and smells of mildew. There is no comfort to be found. You hear the heavy footsteps of the porter moving down the hall. He is checking the latches. He is making sure that the gates are secure. He carries a lantern that casts long, distorted shadows against the peeling plaster. For a moment, his light fills your corner, and you see the true state of the floor. It is covered in a layer of grime so thick that it has become its own surface, a carpet of filth that has been trodden down by thousands of feet over dozens of years. He looks at you, his face a mask of boredom, and then he moves on. The light fades, leaving you in a darkness so thick you can almost feel it against your skin. You are trapped in the belly of the beast, and the belly is cold, dark, and utterly indifferent to your presence. The iron gates are shut, the rotted latches are thrown, and there is absolutely no way out. You are sitting on the edge of a thin, lumpy mattress, and the air in the room is heavy with more than just the scent of unwashed bodies and cheap ale. There is a new smell drifting through the corridors of this house of sin, one that makes your stomach turn. It is the smell of rotting meat mixed with the sharp, metallic tang of chemical ointments. You have heard the whispers in the streets and the frantic prayers in the cathedrals. They call it the Great Pox or the French disease or the Neapolitan evil. Whatever the name, it is a shadow that has fallen over every brothel in Europe, and tonight, you realize that you are trapped in its epicenter. For centuries, the inhabitants of these brothels dealt with the usual ailments of their trade. There were the minor itches and the burning discomforts that everyone simply accepted as part of the job. But this is different. This is something new and terrifying. It arrived like a thunderclap in the late 1500s, following the armies of Charles VIII of France as they marched through Italy. Now it has reached your door. You look at the person across from you, and for the first time you see the marks. They are small at first, perhaps just a few reddish spots on the skin. But you know what comes next. The Great Pox does not just make you sick. It unbalances the very essence of who you are. In this era, medicine is a mixture of ancient Greek theories and desperate superstition. The doctors tell you that your humors are out of alignment, that your blood is boiling with corruption. But as you watch the progression of the disease in your fellow captives, you see a reality far more visceral than any theory. Within weeks, Those small spots turn into weeping sores, great crusty boils that cover the face and the limbs. They are not like normal scabs. They are deep, foul-smelling ulcers that seem to eat the flesh from the bone. You walk down the narrow hallway of the brothel and you hear the moaning. It is not the sound of passion, but the sound of absolute, unyielding agony. The pox attacks the joints and the bones with a ferocity that defies description. It feels, as one survivor wrote, as if your very marrow is being gnawed upon by rats. The pain is constant, a deep and throbbing ache that makes sleep impossible. You see men and women hunched over, unable to straighten their backs because the infection has settled into their spines. Their skin is a map of devastation, peeling away in grayish flakes to reveal the raw, red meat beneath. In the middle of the night, you might see a physician entering the brothel. He is not there to save you, but to experiment on you. There is no cure for the great pox, only a series of treatments that are often more lethal than the disease itself. The most popular remedy is mercury. You see the pots of thick, silver grease sitting on the bedside tables. This is the liquid metal, the quicksilver, and the doctors believe it can purge the poison from your body. They rub it into your skin, over the open sores, and into your joints. They cover you in thick blankets and sit you near a roaring fire to make you sweat. As the mercury enters your system, you begin to experience the cure. Your mouth begins to water uncontrollably. This is what the doctors want to see. They believe that the disease is leaving your body through your saliva. You might produce pints of spit in a single day, or your tongue and throat might swell so much that you can barely breathe. But the mercury does not stop there. It attacks your nervous system. Your hands begin to shake with a permanent tremor. Your teeth loosen in their blackened gums and start to fall out one by one, clicking onto the wooden floorboards. Your breath becomes a weapon of its own, smelling of metallic decay. They have a saying in these streets that for a night with Venus, you must spend a lifetime with Mercury. But in this brothel, a lifetime might only be a few agonizing months. If the mercury does not work, they might try the guaiacum wood. This is a heavy, dark timber brought back from the New World across the sea. They ground it into a powder and boil it into a bitter, dark tea. You are forced to drink gallons of this liquid while locked in a small, windowless room that is heated until the air is thick with steam. You are not allowed to eat anything but a few crumbs of biscuit and a bit of dried raisin. They want to dry you out, to sap the moisture from your body until the pox has nowhere left to hide. You sit in the dark, gasping for air, feeling your heart hammer against your ribs, wondering if the heat or the hunger will kill you before the infection does. The psychological toll is just as heavy as the physical rot. In the medieval mind, a disease this horrific and this focused on the acts of the flesh could only be one thing. It was a divine punishment. You look at your reflection in a polished piece of metal and you do not recognize the person looking back. The pox has a way of dissolving the features. It eats away at the bridge of the nose until the center of the face collapses inward. It leaves the skin pitted and scarred, as if it had been scorched by fire. People look at you not with pity, but with a holy terror. To have the pox is to carry the mark of Cain. It is a public declaration of your sins, written in the very decay of your features. Inside the brothel, the atmosphere turns from one of forced merriment to one of a living tomb. The music has stopped. The laughter has been replaced by the sound of coughing and the shuffling of feet. The owners of the house are desperate. They try to hide the sick, pushing them into the damp cellars or the attic rooms where the thatch is thin and the rain leaks through. They do not want to lose their profits. So they force the girls to cover their sores with thick white lead powder and heavy rouge. In the flickering candlelight, A woman might look beautiful, but as you get closer, you see the powder cracking over a weeping ulcer. You smell the cloying scent of rose water trying and failing to mask the odor of gangrene. There is no escape from the realization that everyone in this house is a ticking clock. The pox moves at its own pace. For some, it is a swift execution, taking them in a matter of months as the infection spreads to the brain, causing madness and convulsions. For others, it is a slow, decades-long erosion. You might seem to recover for a time, only for the pain to return years later, striking at your heart or your mind. You have seen the old ones in the corners of the tavern, people with vacant eyes and wandering wits, their bodies broken and their memories gone. That is the future the pox offers you. The walls of the brothel seem to shrink as the night goes on. You realize that the locks on the doors are not just to keep the authorities out, but to keep the contagion in. The city outside is terrified. They have begun to pass laws, banning those with the French disease from the markets and the churches. In some towns, they are building special hospitals called lazarettos, which are essentially prisons for the dying. If you are caught with the marks on your skin, you will be dragged from your bed and cast into one of these pits, where the only care you will receive is a final prayer from a priest who is too afraid to touch you. You look down at your own hands. Are they shaking because of the cold? Or is it the first sign of the mercury tremors? Is that itch on your arm a simple flea bite? Or is it the beginning of the great pox? In this world, there is no way to be sure until it is too late. There are no microscopes to see the spiral-shaped bacteria, and there are no antibiotics to kill it. There is only the wait. You are trapped in a cycle of desperation where the very air you breathe feels heavy with the promise of decay. The brothel, once a place of fleeting pleasure and stolen warmth, has become a laboratory of human suffering, and you are the primary subject. As the candle gutters out and the room falls into shadows, you hear a wet, rattling breath from the pallet next to yours. Someone is reaching the end of their journey. There will be no funeral, no morning bells, and no marble headstone. When the morning comes, the body will be rolled into a rough cloth and taken away in the dark, buried in an unmarked pit outside the city walls. This is the reality of the great pox. It is a sentence without a cure, a slow disintegration of the body and the soul, and tonight, you are forced to watch the first chapter of your own destruction unfold in the gloom of this rotting house. The silence that follows is the heaviest thing of all. It is the silence of a world that has no answers for the fire in your bones. The light is the first thing that betrays you. In this era, darkness is not just the absence of light. It is a physical weight, a thick and suffocating presence that swallows everything beyond the reach of a flickering, guttering flame. You are sitting in a room where the only illumination comes from a single, sputtering tallow candle. This is not the clean, white wax you might imagine from a modern church or a wealthy estate. This candle is made of rendered animal fat, likely sheep or cow. It is yellowish, greasy, and it smells like a slow-cooking roast that has gone very, very wrong. As it burns, it releases a thick, black soot that coats the ceiling and clogs your nostrils. The light it provides is weak and orange, casting long, distorted shadows that dance across the timber walls like specters. In this dim, wavering orange glow, your eyes struggle to adjust. Every movement in the room is exaggerated. A man tilting his head to whisper to a companion looks like a shifting mountain. A hand reaching for a cup becomes a claw. And because your vision is so limited, your other senses begin to sharpen, whether you want them to or not. You hear the rhythmic thumping of feet on the floorboards above you, the sound of a heavy oak door groaning on its rusted hinges, and the low, guttering murmur of voices in the hallway. This is the sensory reality of a medieval brothel at night. It is a place designed to hide things, but that means it is also a place where you cannot see what is coming for you. You are sitting at a low, scarred table trying to look like you belong. But you do not belong. You are an outsider, and in a place like this, being an outsider is the same as being a target. The atmosphere in the room is thick with more than just smoke. There is a palpable tension, a volatile energy that feels like a coiled spring. You have to understand that the people around you are living on the absolute edge of society. Many of them are men who have spent their day engaged in backbreaking labor or, worse, men who have no work at all and live by their wits and their cruelty. They have been drinking cheap, potent ale or sour wine that has been watered down and then spiked with herbs to hide the rot. Their inhibitions are gone, replaced by a desperate, defensive pride. In this setting, the smallest slight is an invitation to violence. If you accidentally catch a man's eye for a second too long, he will not look away. He will see it as a challenge. If you brush against someone as you try to navigate the cramped space, they will not offer an apology. They will offer a fist or a blade. There is no concept of a polite misunderstanding here. In the 14th or 15th century, honor is not just for knights in shining armor. Even the lowliest laborer or the most desperate thief has a sense of personal territory and reputation that they are willing to defend with blood. You notice the man sitting 3 stools away from you. He is wearing a stained leather tunic and his hands are calloused and dirty. He hasn't looked at the woman beside him for several minutes. Instead, he has been watching you. You try to look down at your drink, but you can feel his gaze. It is a predatory stare, the kind of look someone gives a piece of fruit they are considering peeling. This is the danger of the dark. In a modern city, there are cameras, there are police officers on the corner, and there is the relative safety of well-lit streets. Here, there is none of that. If this man decides to take your coin purse, or if he simply dislikes the way your clothes look too expensive for this neighborhood, there is nothing to stop him from acting. The violence, when it happens, is not like the movies. There is no dramatic music, no slow motion, and certainly no fair play. Starts with a sound. Maybe it is the sudden, sharp scrape of a stool being pushed back against the floorboards. Maybe it is the sound of a cup hitting the table with a dull thud. Before you can even process what is happening, the man is standing. He says something, but his accent is so thick and his voice is so distorted by rage that you cannot understand the words. You only understand the intent. You see the flash of steel before you see the hand that holds it. You must remember that in the Middle Ages, almost everyone carries a knife. It is an essential tool for eating, for cutting rope, for daily life. But in a brothel, that tool becomes a weapon. It is likely a simple, single-edged utility knife, or perhaps a rondel dagger with a stiff, needle-like blade design to pierce through gaps in leather or mail. It doesn't need to be fancy to be lethal. In the cramped, low-ceilinged confines of the room, a long sword would be useless. A knife, however, is perfect. It is fast, it is quiet, and it is devastatingly effective. As the man moves toward you, you realize that the room has gone silent. The woman who was talking to you has vanished into the shadows. The tavern keeper, a man with shoulders like a bull and eyes like flint, makes no move to intervene. This is a crucial lesson in survival. The staff are not there to protect you. They are there to protect the house. As long as you are the one getting hurt and not the furniture or the walls, they will likely let the situation play out. They might even help the victor strip your body once the screaming stops. The brawl erupts in a chaotic blur. Someone else throws a punch, not at you, but at their neighbor, sparked by the sudden surge of adrenaline in the room. This is the contagion of violence in a dark, crowded space. One spark sets off the whole tinderbox. You find yourself pushed back against the wall. The wood is cold and damp against your spine. You are trying to find an exit, but the door is obscured by a shifting mass of bodies. The air is suddenly full of the smell of unwashed bodies, sour breath, and the metallic tang of blood. You realize then that you are not just fighting a person, you are fighting the environment. The floor is uneven, slick with spilled drink and God knows what else. If you fall, you are finished. In a medieval street fight or a brothel brawl, once you are on the ground, the rules of combat disappear. You will be kicked, stomped, and stabbed until you stop moving. There is no referee to step in. There is no one to call for help. Even if you manage to avoid the blades, you are still in danger from the house itself. Many of these establishments are warrens of small rooms, narrow hallways, and steep, dangerous stairs. If a fight breaks out, the owners might decide to clear the room by force. They employ men known as bullies or harlots men. These are professional thugs whose job is to keep a lid on the chaos just enough to keep the coins flowing. They carry heavy wooden cudgels or lead-weighted maces. They do not care who started the fight. They only care about ending it. They will swing indiscriminately into the crowd, cracking skulls and breaking ribs until the room is quiet again. If you manage to scramble out of the main room and into the hallway, the danger does not end. The hallway is a pitch-black tunnel. Your heart is hammering against your ribs like a trapped bird. You can hear the sounds of the brawl behind you, the shouts of pain and the crashing of wood. You are fumbling along the wall, trying to find the stairs that lead to the street. But in the dark, every door looks the same. You might stumble into another room where more danger awaits, or you might find yourself at the top of a flight of stairs you cannot see. A fall down a steep, medieval staircase in the dark is often as fatal as a knife wound. Let us say you make it to the door. You burst out into the night air, which feels freezing against your sweat-soaked skin. You might think you are safe, but the medieval city at night is a labyrinth of shadow. There are no streetlights. The only light comes from the moon or the occasional candle in a distant window. You are a stranger in a district known for its lawlessness. In London, this would be the Southwark Stews, a place technically outside the jurisdiction of the city's mayor. Here, the law is a distant, abstract concept. If you were to cry out for help, you might trigger the hue and cry. This is the medieval legal system's version of a 911 call. By law, anyone who hears a cry of distress is supposed to stop what they are doing and join the pursuit of the criminal. But who is the criminal here? In the eyes of the locals, you are the one causing the disturbance. You are the one who brought trouble to their doors. Instead of help, your cries might only bring more men out into the street. Men who are more interested in silencing you than in saving you. The reality is that a night in a medieval brothel is a gamble where the house always has the advantage. You are risking your life for a few hours of escape in a world that is inherently violent and unforgiving. The darkness is not your friend. The staff are not your allies, and the law is nowhere to be found. As you stand in the cold mud of the street, listening to the fading sounds of the brawl behind you, you realize that your survival was entirely a matter of luck. You didn't last because you were stronger or smarter. You lasted because, this time, the blade missed, the stairs didn't crumble, and the shadows were just deep enough to hide you while you fled. But the night is long, and in this world, luck is a resource that runs out far faster than the oil in a lamp. You sit on the edge of a straw-stuffed mattress that feels more like a bag of rocks than a bed. The air in this small, cramped room is thick with the smell of tallow candles and the dampness of the stone walls. You look down at the dress you are wearing. It is made of a fabric that looks expensive from across a smoky room, perhaps a deep crimson wool or a shimmering, cheap silk imported from the East. It is certainly finer than anything you have ever owned. But as you run your fingers over the hem, you realize it is not a gift. It is a tether. Every thread, every ribbon, and every polished button belongs to the master of this house. And because you are wearing it, you now owe him for it. In this world, the medieval brothel is not just a place of sin or secrets. It is a finely tuned machine of economic extraction. You might have come here because you were starving, or perhaps because you were tricked, or maybe because you had no other choice after being cast out by your family. But the moment you stepped across the threshold, you ceased to be a person in the eyes of the law and the ledger. You became a debtor. And in the Middle Ages, debt is a hole that grows deeper the more you try to climb out of it. Take a moment to look at the ledger sitting on the heavy oak table in the common room downstairs. It is a thick book, bound in scarred leather, filled with rows of cramped, ink-stained names. Your name is there now. Beneath it is a list of figures that would make your head spin. You think you are here to earn money, to save up enough to buy a small cottage or perhaps just enough to pay your way to a new town where no one knows your face. But you soon learn the cruel mathematics of the stews. First, there is the rent. You are charged for the privilege of sitting in this room, for the straw you sleep on, and for the very roof over your head. In the bathhouses of Southwark, those famous stews controlled by the Bishop of Winchester, the law actually forbids the owner from overcharging you for your room. But the law is a distant thing, and the man with the keys is very close. He will tell you that the official rate only covers a bare cell. If you want a blanket that does not crawl with lice, that costs extra. If you want a fire in the hearth to keep the winter chill from settling in your bones, that is another mark against your name. Then there is the food. You are not permitted to leave to buy your own bread at the market. You are a resident of the house, and the house provides. But the house provides at a premium. The ale you drink to dull the senses is watered down, yet it costs 3 times what it would at the local tavern. The pottage is thin and salty, designed to make you thirsty so you will buy more ale. Every meal you eat is another line in that ledger. By the time you wake up in the morning, you have already spent more than you can possibly earn in a day of work. You look at your hands. They are stained with the grime of the city. You want to wash, but even the water has a price. In the medieval mind, everything is a commodity. The owner of the brothel, whether it is a man or a powerful madam often called an abbess, understands that the best way to keep you from leaving is to ensure you can never afford to walk away. If you try to slip out the door in the dead of night, you are not just a woman leaving a job. You are a thief. You are stealing the dress on your back, the shoes on your feet, and the food currently digesting in your stomach. This is the debt trap. It is a cage made of ink and paper, and it is more effective than any iron bar. In many jurisdictions, a woman who owes money to a brothel keeper cannot legally leave until that debt is settled. If you try to run, the city guards, the very men who are supposed to uphold the law, will hunt you down. They will bring you back, and your debt will double to pay for the cost of your capture. You are caught in a cycle of bonded labor that looks remarkably like slavery, hidden behind the thin veil of a business transaction. Think about the clothes again. In the medieval world, clothing is one of the most expensive things a person can own. A single high-quality gown could cost as much as a laborer earns in a year. The master of the house fronts you this cost. He tells you that you must look the part of a lady of pleasure to attract the wealthy merchants and the visiting knights. He brings in a seamstress to fit the gown to your frame. He gives you a string of glass beads that look like pearls in the dim light. You feel beautiful for a moment, perhaps even powerful. But as the seamstress pulls the laces tight, you realize you are being stitched into a contract you never fully understood. As the night progresses, you realize that the fees do not stop at the basics. There is the fee for the protection the house provides. There is the fine you must pay if you are seen speaking to a client in a way that the master does not like. There is the fee for the doctor who comes once a month to look for the signs of the burning sickness. A visit that is more about protecting the house's reputation than your health. And of course, there are the tips. The servants who bring the water, the guards who stand at the door, the musicians who play in the common room. They all expect a cut of whatever coin passes through your hands. You might think that on a busy night, when the common room is full of boisterous men and the silver is flowing, you might finally make a dent in that ledger. But the house takes its share first. Often, the owner takes half of everything you earn. From your remaining half, you must pay back your mounting debts. At the end of a long, exhausting night, you find that you owe more than you did when the sun went down. The interest is predatory. The bookkeeping is dishonest. And you have no one to whom you can complain. The psychological toll of this trap is devastating. You begin to realize that your body is no longer your own property. It is a tool used to service a debt that can never be paid. You see the older women in the house, those who have been here for years. Their faces are etched with a weary resignation. They stopped trying to count the tally marks long ago. They know that the only way out of the stew house is in a shroud, or if they become so old and broken that they are no longer profitable, at which point they are tossed into the street with nothing but the rags they can scavenge. This is the reality of the medieval sex trade that the romanticized stories of knights and ladies often forget. It was an industry built on the total economic subjugation of the vulnerable. You are not a partner in a business. You are an asset in a portfolio. The master of the house looks at you the same way a farmer looks at a plow horse. He will feed you enough to keep you working, and he will keep you healthy enough to be useful, but he will never let you grow strong enough to break the harness. You hear a heavy footstep in the hallway outside your door. It is the master, or perhaps one of his henchmen, coming to check the nightly earnings. You feel a cold knot of dread in your stomach. You reach for the small wooden chest where you keep your few personal belongings, but you remember that even the chest is rented. There is nothing in this room that is truly yours. Not the candle, not the bed, not the dress, and certainly not your future. As the door creaks open, you realize that the bars of this prison are not made of iron. They are made of the very things you thought would help you survive. The food that keeps you alive, the clothes that cover your skin, and the roof that keeps off the rain are the very chains that bind you to this life. You are paying for your own chains, one copper coin at a time, and the night is only getting darker. You realize now that survival in this place is not about strength or wit. It is about whether or not you can endure the slow, grinding weight of a debt that has no end. The master smiles as he enters, a ledger tucked under his arm, and you know that before the sun rises, he will have found another reason to add another mark next to your name. You listen as the heavy iron bells of the cathedral toll for vespers, the sound vibrating through the thin, timber walls of your small room. It is a deep, resonant sound that should offer comfort, a reminder of the divine order that governs every soul in the kingdom. But for you, those bells are a boundary. They are the sound of a world that has decided you no longer belong to it. You stand by the window, watching the respectable folk hurry toward the parish church, their heads bowed against the evening mist. They are the wives of bakers, the daughters of drapers, and the widows of stonemasons. They walk with a purpose you have lost, wrapped in the quiet dignity of their station. To them, you are not a neighbor or a fellow parishioner. You are a shadow, a necessary stain on the fabric of their holy city. In the medieval mind, the world is a great chain of being, a ladder reaching from the dirt beneath your feet up to the throne of the Almighty. Every person has their rung, their specific place that defines who they are and how they must behave. But you have fallen off the ladder. By entering the doors of the brothel, you have entered a state of social and spiritual suspension. The Church Fathers, men like St. Augustine and Thomas Aquinas, have written at length about your existence. They compare the brothel to the sewer of a great palace. If you remove the sewer, the palace becomes a stinking, uninhabitable mess. Thus, they argue the prostitute is a necessary evil. You are the vessel that catches the lust and filth of men, so that the purity of good women might be preserved. It is a cold, clinical logic that keeps you alive while simultaneously stripping you of your humanity. You are a shrew in the eyes of the law, a woman who has forgotten her place and abandoned the silence and submission expected of her sex. The word shrew is a jagged one, used to cut down any woman who speaks too loudly, acts too boldly, or lives outside the direct control of a father or a husband. In the brothel, you are the ultimate shrew. You have commercialized your body, taking what should be a private duty of marriage and turning it into a public transaction. This defiance of the natural order makes you dangerous. It makes you a target for the righteous anger of the community. You are not just a sinner. You are a disruption. When you do venture out into the daylight, you cannot hide who you are. The sumptuary laws, those rigid rules that dictate what every class of person may wear, ensure that your shame is visible from 100 paces. While the merchant's wife wears a hood of fine silk or a gown of deep crimson wool, you are forbidden such luxuries. In many cities, you are forced to wear a specific marker of your trade. Perhaps it is a striped hood of yellow and white, or a shoulder scarf of a garish, bright hue that marks you as a common woman. In some places, you must wear a bell or a specific type of badge. The goal is simple. No man should ever mistake a woman of the stews for a woman of virtue. You feel the weight of that yellow cloth as you walk the streets to buy bread. It feels like a brand, a physical manifestation of the stigma that follows you. You see the way mothers pull their children to the other side of the road as you approach. You see the way the guards at the gate look through you as if you were made of glass, or worse, the way they look at you with a predatory grin that says you have no right to complain if they choose to be rough. You are civilly dead. This is a term that carries more weight than any physical chain. It means that in the eyes of the law, you have lost your voice. You cannot testify in court. You cannot inherit property in the way a respectable woman might. If someone were to strike you or rob you in the street, the magistrates would likely laugh you out of the hall. How can a woman who sells her honor claim to have been wronged? The stigma is not just social, it is deeply, terrifyingly spiritual. You are told that your very presence is a temptation, a snare laid by the devil. Yet, the Church also holds up the image of Mary Magdalene, the patron saint of the penitent. You see her image in the stained glass when you dare to peek through the church doors. She is beautiful, her long hair flowing, her eyes wet with tears of regret. The priests tell you that there is a path back to God, but it is a path of absolute brokenness. To be forgiven, you must first accept that you are the lowest of the low. You must perform public penance, perhaps walking barefoot through the stones of the marketplace while the townspeople jeer and throw filth. You must give up everything you have, which is usually nothing, and enter a convent for fallen women where you will spend the rest of your days in silence and hard labor. For most, this path is an impossible one. And so, you remain in the middle ground, the gray space between the light of the church and the darkness of the pit. You are the outcast of God, a creature that the world needs but refuses to love. The stigma of the shrew follows you even into your sleep. You are haunted by the voices of the preachers who scream about the fires of hell, and the voices of the men who pay for your time but whisper insults into your ear while they take it. They call you a harlot, a strumpet, a piece of meat. They use these words to distance themselves from the act they are performing. If you are not a human being with a soul, then their sin is less significant. By dehumanizing you, they preserve their own sense of self. You look at your hands, roughened by the cheap lye soap used to scrub the floors of the brothel. These are the hands that will never hold a child of your own in a house that belongs to you. These are the hands that will never be joined in a holy marriage. The stigma is a wall that grows taller with every night you spend behind these doors. You are trapped in a cycle where your only means of survival is the very thing that ensures your exile. Every coin you earn is another nail in the coffin of your reputation. The atmospheric pressure of the city feels different for you. The smoke from the hearths, the smell of roasting meat from the cookshops, the sound of laughter from the tavern next door, all of it feels like it belongs to a world you are merely watching through a thick pane of ice. You are in the room, but you are not of the room. You are a ghost while you are still breathing. This is the true horror of the medieval brothel. It is not just the physical danger or the threat of disease. It is the absolute, crushing loneliness of being an outcast in a society that believes your exclusion is divinely ordained. Even the other women in the house, your sisters in this trade, are competitors for the meager scraps of dignity that remain. There is a hierarchy even among the fallen. The woman who serves the wealthy merchants looks down on the woman who serves the soldiers. The woman who still has her youth looks with pity and fear at the woman whose face is beginning to line and fade. The stigma breeds a bitterness that turns woman against woman. You are all shrews now, all outcasts, but the desperate need to feel superior to someone, anyone, keeps the air in the brothel thick with tension and sharp tongues. As the sun finally disappears and the shadows in your room grow long and distorted, you realize that the stigma is not something you wear like a garment. It is something that has seeped into your skin, into your bones. It changes the way you carry yourself. You no longer walk with your head held high. You develop a quick, scurrying gait, a way of moving through the world that tries to occupy as little space as possible. You become an expert at reading faces, at spotting the twitch of a lip or the narrowing of an eye that precedes an insult or a blow. You are the shrew, the unruly woman, the outcast of God. And as the master of the house calls your name from the bottom of the stairs, his voice rasping with the remnants of a day spent shouting at the world, you realize that your night is only just beginning. The world outside may have turned its back on you, but the world inside this house is ready to consume what is left. You reach for the striped hood, the mark of your station, and wrap it around your head. It is your uniform, your brand, and your cage. You step toward the door, leaving the sound of the cathedral bells behind, sinking once more into the darkness where the forgotten live. The air in the hallway is thick with the scent of stale ale and the cheap tallow candles that gutter in the drafts. Each flickering flame casts a shadow that looks like a mocking figure, a reminder of the saints you once prayed to and the family that has likely struck your name from their records. To be a shrew in this age is to be a lesson to all other women. You are the cautionary tale whispered by mothers to their daughters. You are the example of what happens when a woman loses her protection and her place. You are the living proof that in this world, there is no safety for those who fall outside the shadow of the cross. You hear the roar of a drunken laugh from the common room below, a sound that cuts through your thoughts like a blunt knife. It is the sound of the world that uses you, the world that creates the demand for your existence while simultaneously condemning you for providing it. You are the outcast, the necessary evil, the woman of the stews. And as you descend the stairs, you feel the weight of every judgment, every sermon, and every law pressing down on your shoulders, a burden far heavier than any stone. This is your life, a permanent exile in the heart of the city, a night that never truly ends because for a woman like you, the sun of grace has long since set. The floorboards groan under your feet, a familiar sound that seems to echo the weariness in your own heart. You see the master waiting at the foot of the stairs, his eyes scanning you not as a person, but as an asset to be managed. He does not see the stigma or the soul. He sees the marks on the ledger and the coins in the purse. To him, your status as an outcast is merely a business advantage, a way to ensure you have nowhere else to go. You are his, and you are the city's, and you are the church's, but you are never your own. The stigma is the chain that binds you to this house, more securely than any iron shackle ever could. You take a breath, tasting the damp, heavy air, and prepare to face the night. The cathedral bells have fallen silent, leaving only the sound of the world that has cast you out, and the world that is about to let you in. You step away from the flickering torchlight of the stews and into a darkness that feels heavy and thick like wet wool. The ground beneath your boots has changed. It is no longer the packed earth and timber of the main thoroughfares. Now it is a sucking, black mire that threatens to pull the shoes right off your feet with every step you take. You are walking toward the very edge of the liberty of the clink, moving away from the noise of the taverns and the rhythmic thumping of the music. The air here is different. It is colder, carrying the sharp, iron tang of the river mud and something else that you cannot quite name but can certainly feel. It is the scent of a place where the living do not linger. You have reached the corner of Red Cross Way. In the daylight, this place might look like nothing more than a patch of waste ground, a bit of scrubland that the city builders forgot. But in the dead of night, it reveals its true identity. This is the Crossbones burial ground. It is the final destination for those who lived on the fringes of London life, and for you, if you were one of the women working the stews, it is the only piece of earth that will ever truly be yours. Stop for a moment and look at the ground beneath you. You are standing on a site where thousands of bodies are packed into the earth, layered like the pages of a tragic book. But there are no monuments here. There are no marble angels, no carved names, and no stone crosses to mark where a mother, a daughter, or a friend was laid to rest. In the eyes of the church and the state, the people buried here did not earn the right to be remembered. They were the outcast dead. You might find it strange or even cruel when you consider who owned this land. The very ground you are standing on belonged to the Bishop of Winchester. This is the great irony of your life in the medieval brothels. You worked in a house that was licensed by the bishop. You followed the rules he set down in his ordinances. You paid the fines that lined his pockets and ensured that the church grew wealthy from the trade of the stews. You were his goose, a Winchester goose, as they call the women of this district. Yet, despite being a source of income for the Holy Cathedral just a short walk away, the church refuses to recognize you in death. Because you sold your body, you are considered a public sinner. You are denied the rights of the church. You cannot be buried in consecrated ground. You cannot lie within the churchyard walls where the bells might ring over your head and where the priest might say a prayer for your soul. Instead, you are cast out here to this patch of unhallowed dirt. Imagine the funeral you would have had. There would be no grand procession. There would be no singing of hymns. Most likely, your body would be wrapped in a simple, coarse shroud of cheap linen if you were lucky enough to have friends who could afford it. If not, you might be buried in nothing at all. You would be carried here in the gray light of dawn or the deep shadows of night, far from the eyes of the respectable citizens who used your services just hours before. The physical reality of this place is a far cry from the sanitized history books. Because the land was so crowded, the graves were never deep. You can imagine the smell during a warm summer rain, when the earth begins to heave and the secrets of the pits threaten to rise to the surface. In the winter, the ground would be as hard as iron, making it nearly impossible for the grave diggers to do more than scratch a shallow trench. You would be laid down among others who shared your fate. You would be part of a community of the forgotten, stacked one on top of another in a silent, eternal embrace. As you stand here in the silence, you begin to understand the psychological weight of this fate. In the medieval mind, where you were buried mattered more than almost anything else. To be buried in consecrated ground was to be placed in the care of God, waiting for the day of resurrection. To be denied that was to be cast into a spiritual limbo. It was a final, permanent branding of your soul as something lesser, something broken and beyond saving. The church used this fear as a tool of control, yet they continued to profit from the very acts that led to this exclusion. It is a hypocrisy that hangs in the cold air like a fog. You look down at your hands, imagining them worn and calloused from years of work in the stews. You think about the life that leads a person to this patch of dirt. It was not a life of luxury or choice for most. It was a life of survival. Many of the women buried beneath your feet came to Southwark because they had nowhere else to go. Perhaps they were orphans or widows, or women who had been ruined by a single mistake in a society that offered no second chances. They came here to the stews to earn enough to eat, to have a roof over their heads, and to find some semblance of safety in a world that was often violent and cold. And for that struggle, for that act of staying alive, this is their reward. You hear a sound in the distance, a low groan of timber or perhaps just the wind catching the corner of a nearby warehouse. It reminds you that the city is always moving, always consuming. London in the Middle Ages was a hungry beast, and it required a constant supply of people to keep its heart beating. The stews were part of that machinery. They provided a service that the authorities deemed necessary to prevent greater sins, yet they treated the people who provided that service as disposable parts. Once you were used up, once the disease, the violence, or the sheer exhaustion of the life took hold of you, you were simply discarded here at Crossbones. You begin to walk slowly across the uneven ground. You have to be careful where you step. The earth is lumpy and unpredictable. You realize that you are not just walking on dirt, but on the history of thousands of nameless women. Each lump in the ground represents a story that was never told. It represents a laugh that was silenced, a dream that was crushed, and a person who deserved more than a shallow pit in a forgotten corner of Southwark. Think about the silence of this place. In the stews there was always noise. There was the shouting of the men, the calling of the madams, the barking of dogs, and the constant roar of the river. But here, just a few hundred yards away, the silence is absolute. It is a silence that feels like a judgment. It is the silence of a society that has turned its back. You are in the shadow of the great city, close enough to hear the bells of St. Mary Overy, yet you are a world away. Those bells do not ring for you. The dampness starts to seep through your cloak, and you shiver. It is easy to see why people believed in ghosts in a place like this. The air feels crowded with the presence of those who were never given a proper goodbye. You can almost hear the whispered conversations of the women who once walked these same muddy paths, wondering if they would be the next ones to be carried out to the pit. They knew what waited for them. They saw the carts passing by. They knew that their lives were lived on borrowed time and that their ending would be as lonely as their beginning. If you were a woman in the stews, your entire identity would be tied to this paradox. You were a servant of the church's law, but an enemy of the church's morality. You were a necessary part of the city's economy, but a stain on its social fabric. And in the end, you would be returned to the earth in a place that officially did not exist as a holy site. You turn to look back toward the lights of the Liberty. They seem so bright and inviting from here, but you know the truth now. You know that the warmth of the hearths in the stews is a fleeting thing, and that the fine clothes and the strong ale are just distractions from the reality of the mud at your feet. The medieval world was one of sharp contrasts, of high peaks and deep valleys, of gold and filth. Crossbones is the ultimate valley. It is the place where the finery is stripped away and only the raw, cold truth remains. As you prepare to leave this place and move back toward the world of the living, take one last look at the dark expanse of Red Cross Way. It is a humble place, a quiet place, but it is one of the most significant sites in all of London's history. It is a monument to the resilience of those who lived on the edge and a reminder of the cost of a society built on exclusion. You have seen the glamour of the stews, such as it was, and you have heard the music. But you have also seen the destination. You have seen the nameless grave for the lost. And as you walk away, the silence of crossbones follows you, a haunting reminder that in the medieval world, the price of survival was often paid with the very memory of your existence.